How to bake a pie crust without shrinking. For the most part, you can utilize an unglazed or metal ceramic pie plate. It stops the shrinking crusts. Afterward, you can blind bake the dough at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Remember that you can still blind bake the crusts even if you only own glass pie plates. It applies as long as you ensure to cut the dough a tad beyond the pie pan's rim. Make sure to trim the dough for about 1/8 inch. How to bake a pie crust without shrinking. For starters, never forget to provide the pie crust time to rest. The reason being is that the pie crusts tend to shrink when you do not let them sit. Bear in mind that the pie crust's resting time enables the gluten to relax. It occurs in the pie dough process. In addition to that, it acts as a significant role in stopping shrinking once you have baked it. Furthermore, make sure to form it into a flat disc once you have combined the dough. After that, be sure to wrap it in plastic wrap. Then, please put it in the fridge. In so doing, ensure to rest till chilled for approximately 30 minutes. Moreover, be sure to let it rest for around 5 minutes before you drape it into the pie plate. Keep this in mind after you roll out the dough. Although optional, it would be best to store the pie crust in the fridge after adding the filling. Also, please note that you have an extra 10 minutes to spare when adding the filling. That is why make sure to do this before you put it in the oven. 1. Make sure not to overwork the dough. Another thing to consider is to avoid overworking the dough. The main reason is that it leads to an overly firm dough. Plus, it will lead to the shrinking of the pie crust. Besides, it is indeed a rule of thumb not to overcook the dough whenever creating pie crusts. It is also crucial, mainly if you utilize a food processor. Keep in mind that it is alright if there are a few butter chunks. Just make sure to mix the dough as much as needed so they can stick together well. 2. It is best to use low baking temperatures. Always remember that high temperatures tend to make the pie crust's gluten tighten up. As a result, it will shrink. That is why you must bake it slow and, most importantly, low. With that, make sure it is about 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Blind baking. Generally, what is blind baking or pre-baking? You should know that it is the process of baking the pie crust without filling. Remember that you use this technique when filling a pie crust with an unbaked filling. Examples include lemon meringue or cream pie. Moreover, please know that blind baking is not as easy as putting a pie crust in the conventional oven. Always keep in mind that pie crust is soft. That is why it is essential to do the appropriate blind baking process. As a consequence of not doing the proper techniques, it will indeed lead to shrinking. In addition to that, it will cause bubbling and breakage. Be sure to keep the pie crust cold at all times. Before you start baking, you want the pie crust to be cold. With this, know that butter possesses a low melting point compared to shortening. For this reason, it will shrink more as opposed to shortening crust. That is why it is essential to keep the pie crust cold. Doing so will prevent melting and, most importantly, shrinking. Additionally, you should chill the pie crust for about 4 hours in the fridge. Likewise, you can freeze it for approximately 30 minutes. Use pie weights to weigh down the pastry. Please take note that pie weights are what most bakers use to blind bake pie crusts. Although, you can blind bake it without the pie weights. Bear in mind that pie weights are expensive. Not only that, but also you constantly need to store them after use. In that regard, you can use alternatives like beans, lentils, and rice. Though, you cannot cook these after you have used them for blind baking the pie crust. Nonetheless, it is necessary to put parchment paper. The reason being is that it protects the pie crust from the pie filling you want to use. Double bake to ensure crispier crusts. It is best to double bake the pie crust when you are blind baking. To do so, you can bake it first with the pie weights. In so doing, you begin baking the edges. After that, make sure to remove the pie weights to bake it again. Doing so will ensure that the pie's bottom will bake thoroughly. As a result, the base will indeed become crispy. Also, make sure to mark the pie crust's bottom with the fork's tines. With that, you will stop the bubbling of the pastry. So, please do this before putting it back in the oven for the second bake. Nevertheless, it only takes about 20 to 25 minutes to completely blind bake the pie crust. Remember, it is okay to fill it with any pie or cream filling you want once it cools. Tips and tricks. It would help to avoid glass pans. The reason being is that they are slippier than ceramic or metal. Although, they are ideal for other crusts such as graham cracker crusts since they do not need baking. Nonetheless, it is best to utilize ceramic or metal pit plates whenever baking your pie crusts. Moreover, never stretch the dough to its maximum extent. The primary cause is that it will pull back during baking. Because of that, it would be best to roll out the dough and ensure it is big enough. Keep in mind that its size should be able to drape into the pie plate. And it should cover it without overstretching. Additionally, it would help to provide an extra half-inch around the pie plate's edge. In so doing, it will have space to somewhat shrink during baking. Also, you do not want to make the crust excessively large. Because of this, ensure to provide a little bit of additional wiggle room. If you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe.